program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I'm your host, Sarah Higdon. We have a lot to talk about because last weekend at Pride got pretty crazy. And obviously, we're not going to talk just about Pride, but I do have an awesome guest today. So we're going to bring him up here. And he is the co-founder of Base Politics and co-host of the Base Brief. And now has a new show called Damage Control.
Hey, how's it going, Sarah?
Oh, hold on. They were cheering for you. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome into the channel. This is your first time coming over here, but we've been pretty we've known each other for a little while now too.
So. Yeah. I don't think we've collabed on camera so far, but we've been behind the scenes, and so it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. And so you are the co-founder of Base Politics. Why don't you just kind of launch into and describe that a little bit, what you're doing there, Base Brief, and the new show?
Yeah, so Base Politics is a multimedia nonprofit. We do articles, videos, social media content, all pushing economic freedom and individual liberty. So we don't really use the word libertarian, but kind of that bent. And then for me personally, Damage Control is the new show I launched under Base Politics, focusing on restoring sanity to LGBT issues, because I know you feel this way, but I feel like we've lost our way, very much so. And what I want to seek to restore is like a sane center-right approach to these issues, because the people on the left who control the mainstream LGBT community have totally lost their minds. They've lost the plot. Whether it's pushing medical treatments for children they can't fully understand, pushing a million fake genders, conflating like non-binary with things about us that we can't change, like being gay or having gender dysphoria, or all the million ways, punch turfs, shut down free speech, all these kinds of things they've attached to it, that we're living through a backlash. And I really think the right polling even bears this out. That the right is declining in support for LGBT acceptance. And I think that's really disheartening, because I think just a few years ago, we'd reached a kind of a spot I'd like to get back to. Trump was the head of the Republican Party, and whatever all his faults, he was fine with gay marriage. The gay stuff really went to the back burner on the right. I felt like we'd made good progress. Some of the trans stuff was more controversial, but most people were fine with transgender adults doing what they would want, as long as, except for things like sports or pre-op people in changing rooms and certain things. But now I've seen this real vitriol, this real backlash, this real backsliding from the right, where all of a sudden they're bringing out the homophobic tropes. All of a sudden they're going full hardcore anti-trans. And some of them want to ban adults from gender transition, just lots of stuff that I really, really am alarmed by. So that's the point of the Damage Control project, is to team up with right of center people from across the LGBT community to try to restore some sanity on these issues, because everybody's lost their mind.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, there was a study that came out this week that shows that acceptance has gone down across the board on LGBT issues. And it's really disheartening, because you're right. I said it, actually, I did an interview that's supposed to come out this week with Candace Taylor, who ran for governor of Georgia. And she's been kind of labeled this transphobic, homophobic bigot, because she doesn't necessarily want to pull, the log cabin Republicans into, like, recognize them officially just because of sexuality. But she's honestly, it was really interesting conversation, because she is one of the nicest people I've ever met. And she's like, I don't care what you do. I just don't think that as a party, we should be celebrating sexuality. Right. And so it was really a good conversation that's going to come out on Wednesday. But also it's interesting because the poll came out last week that showed that 67% of Democrats agree that children should not be transitioning. And I think there might be a little bit different. And actually, there was a poll last year, I believe, that said 70-something% of Americans believe that, males should not compete in women's sports. So it's across party lines, these are reasonable things to assume, which is interesting because I think I've actually probably been a little bit more conservative on these issues, even the trans issues, than you. But you, like we kind of talked about a little bit before the show, you haven't really stepped into the fray that much to talk about LGBT issues as a whole. I will mention that I did really agree with almost all the points you made at the Michael Knowles debate as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. So with my career, when I first started in about 2016 doing commentary and punditry and writing articles, I did some LGBT commentary from the perspective of a right of center gay person. But then I did kind of let that go and not focus on that so much for several years, and really was covering economics and politics and all these other things I still cover, because I never really wanted to be pigeonholed into that or to really focus on that a whole lot. But I felt kind of compelled over the last few months to re-engage because of this backsliding. So that's why I'm doing damage control. That's why we're talking about this right now. And it's why I'm re-engaging on some of these issues, because I can't let the crazy people at the pride parades or the fringe trans Twitter activists, I can't let them speak for us and have people think that's what we all believe, the extreme things they say, or the crazy TikTokers who are talking about kink and kids can coexist. Like, no, that's not us. That's not my people. That's not what I stand for whatsoever. And so a lot of what I'm just trying to do is, I really think there's a saying I really like, that it's hard to hate from up close. And I think that's true across the board, that when people have a gay person or a trans person in their life or in their YouTube algorithm that they watch all the time, that is like them, that is normal, that has American values, that doesn't hate America or want communism or want to push inappropriate things towards children, they realize that actually that mysterious group that I had these preconceived notions about, I shouldn't use those to judge any individual. And so the more people get to know somebody from our communities and have a face they can relate to, I think the more tolerance and acceptance we'll see over time, because it's really when the group is abstract and all you see are the worst representatives that bubble up on the internet, that's when you can start to have some bias or some notions or support backsliding on rights or equality for certain groups, is when you have this idea of them that in most cases is not actually what normal people in those groups believe.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's the truth with everything. I always say that the internet's not real, and it highlights the worst of every extreme, right? Like when I've been traveling the country quite a bit the last year, speaking to a lot of different groups, mostly in connection with now a hate group. No Left Turn Education was deemed a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and that's who I've been doing all these events with Chloe Cole. And it's funny because I get people with MAGA hats and Trump hats and stuff coming up to me, giving me a hug and saying thank you for being there. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is being a representative up close to people, like actually going out and being a good person in society. Just shows people every day that, okay, you're not what I see online. You're not what I see in the news. It's a lot different. But kind of speaking on that, let's jump into Pride weekend across the country.
We're almost done.
It was the last weekend. I thought, you know what? Pride Month went without a hitch this year. I didn't realize just all the lefty cities had their Pride Month this weekend. So so let's look at this. Pull this up real quick. All right. So the first video I have is actually probably the most disturbing video. And it was filmed by Timcast crew in New York. And this is exactly the opposite of this is like what we were talking about with that we're against. So So, like, this reminded me when I saw this video. Do you remember the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus about 2 years ago? They came out with the video that said, "We're coming for your children," and that's like the whole thing that it was about. And they came across as it's like we were joking, it was tongue-in-cheek humor, and now they're chanting it at Pride.
Yeah, look, I think this is demented. I think it's counterproductive. I think there's two possibilities here. One is that they're truly sick and depraved. The other is that they're like trolling the right. They're like, oh, you keep calling us groomers, so we'll like razz you by just chanting this thing. And they don't really mean it. That's what I hope they're doing. That's still not okay, but that's at least the least worst scenario than them actually just saying we're coming for the kids. But I find this so incredibly frustrating because for decades, and I mean decades, gay people were falsely maligned as, you know, they're coming for your kids, or and statistically it's not true, right? They're not more gay people are not more likely to abuse kids. But with that stereotype, really damaging trope haunted us for decades and decades. And now they're like, ha ha ha, yeah, we're coming for your kid. No, just stop. You're literally undoing the decades of blood, sweat, and tears gay activists fought for with your, especially with the way that things can go viral now. And that these, I bet you, look, let me put it this way. I bet you if I put this video on my phone and I walked around in an average gay bar where I am in Michigan and showed this, almost everybody would be like, what the, they would be like, they would not support this, right? They wouldn't agree with this. But these fringe weirdos will go viral, give our whole community a bad name, and set back the entire progress that we've made. And I think it's so harmful. They should know. And I think they do know that this is going to get captured by somebody. It's going to go out on libs of TikTok or whatever, and it's going to go viral. And they might get the attention they ordered, but they're literally sacrificing LGBT acceptance to get it, just to push, you know, just to troll the conservatives or whatever. I think it's disgusting.
Yeah, it's interesting because so it's interesting. I've lived in Atlanta since 2017, and I've never actually made it to the parade. I'm usually hungover because we go out partying the night before. But the festival itself, I've never seen stuff like this at the festival itself. And I've gone to Nashville as well, and Nashville wasn't like this either. It seems like it's like the bigger it is, and like that bigger is the city. And Atlanta is actually the largest pride outside of June, but it's really interesting. I don't get it. And I think it is, they're like testing the boundaries of how far they can actually go. Like in the whole like nakedness. And I guess we'll look at this and see this even more, but it's even like the nakedness of this stuff. It just doesn't help with anything.
There's nothing to do with public nudity, has nothing to do with LGBT, right? And yet they wrap that up in it. Straight people and gay people alike can be new. They're just shock trolling, I think.
Yeah, it's the opposite. So I call like the on the right you have a lot of people that are posting for rage bait. They're posting rage bait, and I think that's a little bit of what this is. They know that it's going to go viral, so they're like, hey, we can use the Streisand effect as well and just push this, but it doesn't help acceptance. It's like the opposite, you know, it hurts you. And so it just drives a wedge deeper. But if you saw my video a couple weeks ago, that's exactly what the progress flag symbolizes.
It's so ugly. I hate it.
And it's in the chevron is literally cutting through the original LGBT flag.
And the whole point of the rainbow was that it's supposed to represent everybody. And now they have to add a stripe or a circle for every fake thing they invent. Here's what my boyfriend and I jokingly say is that you can tell the based gays by if they just have the rainbow, they don't have the progress. It's like a quiet form of protest against the wokies to just have the regular rainbow.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then they're really based if they have the rainbow Gadsden flag.
I used to have one of those.
I actually have one. It's in the closet. So yeah, that's how you know that they're really based. And then I mean, but even this, like you go to New York Pride and you have Savannah Hernandez reported.
Oh, I haven't seen this one.
All the leather daddies just walking around, The pups. Oh yeah, the pups.
Oh my God, I hate that. That has nothing to do with being gay. It really doesn't. Kinks are extracurricular, to quote Blair White, right? Like straight people and gay people and trans people or non-trans people, they all have kinks and fetishes and whatever. I really don't care. I'm a libertarian. Do whatever you want in your own bedroom. But that don't conflate that with our inanimate characteristics we can't change, your hobbies and interests. And also, it shouldn't be too much to ask that one of two things. Either no kink at Pride, which is my preferred option. But if you are going to do kink at Pride, 18 up. Don't expose kids to sexual kinks and fetishes. It should be like something that should be the baseline that everyone just assumes we start at. These two things can't go together. But in many of these videos, we see them doing this stuff, this kink fetish display, or the partial or full nudity. I saw some full nudity today at one of them in front of children. Yeah, there you go. They're marching
right
down.
Here, yeah.
And unless you can guarantee, first off, I think even adults, I'm not sure they should be doing that. But unless you can guarantee me that they kept that whole audience 18 up, which I doubt they did, then that is seriously messed up. I mean, at least I guess you could say, like, if adults know there's going to be nudity and choose to go there, so be it. But most of these Pride events are not age restricted. They're open to the public. People go. There are kids around. And yet you see them doing this kink and fetish stuff. And you even see some of them arguing like explicitly. There's a Washington Post headline from 2021 that says something to the effect of, yes, kink belongs at Pride, and I want my kids to see it. And I'm just like,
I remember that.
I
actually did a video on that at the time. I did a video on that at the time, and I said exactly what you just said. I said either you can have kink at Pride and you can have kids, or you can have kids at Pride, but you can't have both.
How is that controversial?
I don't know. It's really interesting because I don't, like you said, I think I said this because I was on Timcast on the first. And I said this either on the main show or that it might have been in the after show because we talked a lot of LGBT issues in the after show. But I said this. I said, straight people have kinks, but you don't see them like going out in the street and flaunting it. It's like it just for some reason, and it brings back like you're talking about. It brings back all the stigmas that have always been labeled on the community. So then now people are going, see, I told you this slippery slope. If you let them get married, now they're gonna have, bringing it on to children. And we fought off, the community fought off NAMBLA one time, didn't think it was going to have to happen. The whole left is going to support an organization like that,
See, I still think most people don't. I really do. But it's such a messy issue. I think it gets conflated a lot. I don't know what to make of it. But I guess from their perspective, they view these things as related because they would say that like the shame and repression is what held them back and in their lives and forced them to be closeted and block them from being their authentic selves. And that, public displays of sexuality are about rejecting that same shame and that same stigma and all these things. But it's like, not all shame is bad. So the flaw, a little bit, shame is one of those things like you want to have a little bit, you don't want to have too much, and you don't want to have none, because a little bit of shame is good if it just keeps you from, acting like a fool in public. You shouldn't be ashamed about things you can't change or choose, whether that's skin
Yeah.
color, whether that's sexual orientation, which is not a choice, whether that's having gender dysphoria, which is not something anyone would really choose. Those
Yeah.
things you should not feel shame for because you can't help it. It's like your eye color, right? But things that you choose to do, maybe or maybe not, you should feel shame for them. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't go to say that in order to not feel shame about my LGBT identity, about who I am, I must be completely shameless about anything. That actually doesn't logically follow. And so I think the appropriate thing would be to cast away the shame for your identity and the things that you can't change, but maybe keep a little bit of it to stop yourself from, exposing yourself in public in front of children. Just a little bit.
Well, that's the question, is like, why would these adults think it was okay to walk around like that when they know that they're probably
at least some of this has to be criminal activity as well.
Well, that's what people have been saying. Now, because we've seen videos. These are from Toronto Pride, but we've seen them. We've seen them in New York. We've seen what is it? This fountain. I don't have that video, but there was the fountain in New York that everybody was topless and everything. I'm like, that's illegal.
Yeah, it would depend on your local laws for like public indecency, but especially in the presence of minors, I would think some of that behavior would be caught up in laws. And it's another thing. We have a real problem in this country with selective justice, or like sometimes enforcement of laws and sometimes not.
Yeah.
I'm someone who's a big proponent of equality under the law. So I don't really think, for example, that having used drugs should disqualify you from gun ownership. But if it does, if that's the law, then sure as heck, that needs to apply to Hunter Biden as well. Right? That's my perspective. If we need to have equal treatment under the law for everyone.
I don't have this one on the schedule, but I was like, there's so much in there. And I have the whole IRS obstruction timeline and everything like that of the Hunter Biden situation. So you're right. I think that if there is a law, it needs to apply to everybody, and it's just not being applied equally across the board, especially when it comes to the elites, because there was a poll I recently found last week that showed like 70% of the even Democrats agreed. It was like something like 80% of people think that Joe Biden did something wrong with mishandled classified information. Same amount of people, actually more people, thought Hillary Clinton did something wrong when she destroyed our server. And so it's like, but yet they're going after Trump. And so that's what's causing.
So I tweeted something that people didn't like. I tweeted that in a just world, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, and Donald Trump would all be in jail. And everybody got mad about that one. But the point I was simply trying to make is just that, like, if somebody not named Hillary Clinton or not named Donald Trump, if a random civil servant or like military staffer handled classified information in the way they handled it, whether it's Trump or Clinton or potentially Biden, although we don't know as much about his case yet, they would go to jail. Like, we have two separate standards. I know you probably know more about this being a veteran, right? But like, there are stories of service people who mishandle classified information and go to jail for years. But it's like we have a politician standard when they do it, and then a normal person standard, what happens when they do it. And that one is way worse than the politician standard. They should be the same. Yeah. They really should.
Yeah,
and
there was something that came out that showed that what Hunter Biden would have been charged for, like the gun crimes, got somebody else 13 years in prison. And so it's like, wait a second. And actually, the Department of Justice broke their own rules in prosecuting. They have rules that will to prosecute the toughest crimes, and yet they didn't pursue the toughest crimes. And actually, the IRS recommended, from the IRS whistleblowers, they recommended that he'd be charged at two felonies for two different felonies for 2 different years, like not filing. It was falsifying tax returns and stuff like that. And I mean, taxation is theft, but if you're going to have these rules and it applies to everybody else, damn well better apply to
Exactly. Like
the
if
crack
I
smoking
don't pay
son
my
of
taxes,
Hunter
I will
Biden.
get in serious trouble. So if the Biden
Yeah.
family doesn't pay their taxes, they should get the same thing. That's all I'm saying. Ideally, I wouldn't like Hunter Biden to have to pay much taxes at all, or me. But if we're going to, we have to have it equal for everybody. That shouldn't be too much to ask.
Did you see that he allegedly, according to the whistleblowers, paid for hookers and wrote him off on his taxes?
I did not see that, and I guess I can't confirm that, but I will say it tracks like with his personality.
Yeah.
You know what?
I
Actually,
thought that was
Sarah, you know
funny.
what I'm not going to swear on your stream, but the most messed up thing of the entire Hunter Biden saga is not the drugs, it's not the hookers, it's not the tax stuff, it's not the gun charge. It is the daughter that he has, 4-year-old Navy
Yes.
Joan, that he
Yep.
refuses to claim paternity of, even though it's been scientifically proven in court proceedings. And he has fought to lower his child support, and he has fought to block Navy Joan from having the last name Biden. That is disgraceful.
Yeah.
We have an
Well, not only did
epidemic
he-
of deadbeat dads in this country,
Yeah.
and Hunter Biden is one of the worst in public life. And then Joe Biden doesn't acknowledge his grandchildren. He says he has 6, but he actually has 7.
Yes,
They put up 6 stockings at the White House for the grandkids, not 7. It's like they just treat this innocent kid like the black sheep of the family through no fault of her own. It's not her fault she was born out of wedlock. I think it's so messed up, and it barely gets any attention or coverage because it's a Democrat.
No, you're absolutely right. That is probably the worst part of the entire saga. I fully agree. I actually said something like that on Twitter the other day. I'm like, I actually tweeted straight to POTUS like, hey, what about your 7th grandchild? You know, because not only did Hunter Biden fight to reduce child support, he flew there on a private jet.
You couldn't write this. You couldn't write that.
No, you couldn't. And you're absolutely right. The worst part too is, like you said, and then the, you know, Joe Biden doesn't even acknowledge, you know, for anything.
Remember when he said he was going to restore decency and norms?
Oh yeah.
At least with Trump, Trump was a degenerate, right? He was totally immoral, but at least you knew that. At least he didn't claim to be some pious person.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was like, you knew it. He was upfront with it, and it was what it was. And I actually said this in the same interview as I talked about earlier. Like, he was the first president that ever came in to office supporting gay marriage. So, and he was probably one of the most LGBT friendly people we had. And even as a veteran myself, I understood like why he did like the trans ban and stuff like that in the military, because like if you have surgery and you're in the military, it takes you away from a deployable status for a year. Like that's a leader's worst nightmare. Like you're taking a spot in the military for a year that you can't actually go do your job. So it's really interesting. It's interesting stuff, but I'm just kind of scrolling through here some of these other videos. This one, thank God for abortion. Libby nailed it. Like, God's not the one to thank for that. And why is there trans flag there? Like, there was a video that also came out that said like trans women are women, so you know they can get abortions. And I'm like, no, that's like not how this works.
Trans men can get abortions, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So I will say this. I really take issue. I've seen pride events in the past where they've got gun control and anti-Trump stuff, and they've got pro-abortion stuff. And setting aside your beliefs, or whether you're pro-choice or whether you're pro-life, it has nothing to do with LGBT rights. And a person who is gay or trans can look at these complex moral debates and come down on either side. And you're only isolating people from what ideally would be an apolitical and neutral cause of LGBT acceptance by conflating it with unrelated partisan issues. Right? These are like poison pills. And oh gosh, what are you putting up on the screen?
I'm trying to get it off. Did you see that video?
Yes, I did. The twerking in the underwear.
The same man did the same thing last year at Minneapolis Pride. So
he should have been banned. Whoever organizes that pride should have banned him.
No, but this is, again, this is the same thing. It's these guys are riding naked on a bike at New York City, and
Next
there's
to
a child.
children?
Yeah, the child joined them.
Jail.
Yeah, jail. Like
Jail.
straight to jail. Like
Jail.
do not pass go. Like straight to jail. What's the next one?
You said straight to jail, don't pass go.
There was one. So
oh my god, is that dude naked?
Oh shit.
In the pup play. Ew.
Yes. This one. Actually, shit.
They're always fat too. I'm just gonna say the nudists are never like thin.
No, there was this one though. This is even what this kind of encapsulates a lot of it too. Is this was at Toronto, and this child is riding a basket for First Transition Related Surgery Program. So it's an organization that does transition related care in Toronto, and they have a child with them, and it's like, how are you not like indoctrinating children into this? Like, and you're not, you're saying that you want children to go through transitions. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't get it. So, but that's not like even it. Like you wrote this article. So I'll pull up some of your articles because you're my guest, and we'll go to base politics now. Pull this one up.
Give me those page views.
Oh yeah, that's what we're doing. Everybody, I always put the links of the article that I do in the comment section. So if you guys go to the comment section, the links are in there, so you can go check out these articles. But so it was HRC declared a national emergency, right? Which makes absolutely no sense.
The Human Rights Campaign.
The problem is, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so they've been around since the early 1980s, and they're this LGBT rights org, but it's basically a Democratic Party front group at this point. They just a few weeks ago, declared a national emergency, saying it's like 5-alarm fire, the worst it's ever been for LGBT rights. That is demented. They're actually saying that 2023, the year of our Lord 2023, is worse than 1985. You had the AIDS epidemic. Gay marriage was a pipe dream. I think anti-sodomy laws were still on the books in some places. It's just the hyperbole. I know gay people are dramatic, but these activists, they just are next level dramatic. It is demented. And also it's like the boy who cried wolf. It's like the 10% of the time they actually have a valid complaint, nobody freaking listens to them because they're so hysterical and partisan the rest of the time.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with the HRC that we're seeing now, and them, doing these very partisan stuff, is they are the ones that are determining businesses' CEI scores.
Yes.
So when like Bud Light came out and they lost their 100% CEI score because they backtracked at all on the whole Dylan Mulvaney scandal. So they lost their score. So now they had the boycott to deal with, and then they had their CEI score to deal with, which feeds into their ESG score to deal with.
I mean, the Bud Light thing is really, it's just chef's kiss, how to completely alienate the right, and then without fixing that, also alienate the left.
Well, they never apologized. Yeah.
No. And they just put those pandering ads to try to recover it, and it just made it worse.
Well, and now they did it again. Well, and I showed on the show last week that Yingling showed exactly how you do it. When Yingling came under fire because they have naming rights to a music festival, and that music festival was going to host an all ages drag show, and and they used Yingling to promote it. Yingling said, no, we have naming rights over that. And we are happy to work with them to change it to an 18 and over drag show. And they apologize for anything there. They don't support, promoting beer to those under the age of 21, but, having drag shows that are sexually explicit for, under 18.
That's what I don't get about the whole drag queen story hour thing. I think people on the right often get a little more worked up than it, like they think it's more widespread than it is. It's still like it goes viral, but it's still a pretty rare thing. Like I don't know anybody anywhere around here having a drag queen story hour. But I will just say, like, why are liberals so opposed to the idea of just making drag 18 plus? Like, it seems pretty common sense. What is the big loss of not being able to bring your child to a drag event? Like, that is, in my opinion, not appropriate for children.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of two minds on some of the laws. What I would say is this: I would support a law saying you can't bring a minor to a sexually lewd performance of any kind, drag or not. Some of these laws go a little too far down the path of targeting drag, but not other similarly situated activities, which I think is a free speech issue at that point. But it's not a free speech issue to simply say anything that is a lewd performance is 18 and up. That seems like a pretty common sense law. And I just don't see what the loss is. What are they missing out on, right? Like,
well, here's an issue because actually just this week, I actually think on Friday, in Florida, the Florida bill was blocked on Friday that banned drag shows for minors because it simply stated it wasn't clear enough, and so they said it was a First Amendment issue because they didn't define what a lewd, performance was.
You have to be careful. These laws can't be vague because laws that are too vague are unconstitutional. I don't know the specifics of that law in Florida, so I can't really say. But there's an issue, for example, an issue with the parental rights, or what critics called the "don't say gay," that I thought was a legitimate critique in Florida, was just that the bill was pretty vague. And I think you have to make these things very specific so that people are on notice about what is and isn't allowed. And it's okay to have reasonable restrictions and safeguards, but you do have to let people know exactly what's allowed and what's not. To pass like vague language and then leave it up to interpretation or enforcement is not really fair to people, and then also leaves it ripe for abuse. If the language is vague, they can enforce it sometimes and not other times, but based on who's well connected and who's not. So, but I will say, it would be great if we had activist organizations with credibility that could actually, like a human rights campaign, before it went super partisan, 15 years ago, it worked with Democrats and Republicans alike, that could be a referee on these things and give honest, this one bill makes sense, this one needs some changes. But because they've made themselves so partisan and hysterical, nobody in the Republican Party listens to a damn word they have to say, and I can't blame them.
That's the same with the ACLU. And I do agree. There's some, I think actually on my very first episode, I read the Tennessee bill that banned drag, and it seemed like a fairly good bill, because it basically just made drag shows the same as, taking a kid to a strip club. And that's they just added to that section of the original bill. One of my biggest concerns about like a lot of the bills that target trans youth is that they specifically, because I've worked on a few of them now, is that as I talk to politicians, I tell them I'm concerned that this bill will be overturned based off of 14th Amendment equal protection laws, because you allow a young female to still get breast implants, but you don't allow males to get breast implants, for example. And so it's specifically targeted to gender dysphoria. And so that could be construed as sex-based discrimination. And that is my biggest concern with a lot of these bills that are being passed right now.
I think that's a valid concern. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I tell every time I testify or I talk to one of these legislators, I'm like, it's not going far enough. You need to make sure that it's not targeting specifically to gender dysphoria, but they end up going and passing it, and we'll see what happens in the courts. And thank God we have the court we have, but they've generally been pretty fair on these issues in terms of, going against the grain, even against Republicans, and saying this law is too vague. Like that was what was interesting. The Arkansas law actually just got blocked last month, which was the first bill that banned any gender transitions in minors. It got blocked, because one of the issues it got blocked for was because it was a First Amendment violation, because it told doctors that they could not recommend other doctors to prescribe those procedures. And so that would be like you telling, you going out and being like, hey, you can go get that over there. And it's like, you wouldn't even be able to be a doctor. And, if you can't, give like referrals to other doctors. And so that was a First Amendment violation.
Yeah, a lot of these bills are sloppy, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
A lot of these bills are sloppy, which is a problem.
Agreed. Well, we've talked quite a bit on this stuff, and so I'm going to skip ahead to, did you see Riley Gaines' testimony at all?
Not much. I saw a few clips.
So for the audience, like Riley Gaines testified alongside some activists, but about being forced to compete. Like, so it was a panel about trans athletes competing with women, which I'm against. I'm assuming you are as well, right, Brad? I don't know.
Yeah, I am against that.
Okay. There was
one take I have that perhaps some Republicans don't agree with. I think trans men should be allowed to compete with boys.
Oh, I think most would agree with that. I think that most people see the male category as an open category, and the female category should be specifically for females. That's the way that I see it, at least. And I don't think anybody would worry about that.
That's a good sign to me, is when the bills only apply to the female. I've seen some bills that say all athletes must compete in by their birth sex. To me, that is needlessly discriminatory, because if a trans male wants to put themselves at a disadvantage, go for it, in my book. I think it's fine. The problem with trans women is there's a biological advantage that doesn't go away through transition. We all know it. Even the woke people know it. They just can't admit it because their friends will get mad at them. They all know it. Yeah. So I do think that's an important distinction, because that's the difference between actually just discriminating or just legislating to protect fairness.
Yeah. And actually, well, have you seen, I've set out on a goal, and I actually want my Twitter to get I want to get subscriptions so I can track my progress with Twitter subscribers. But I'm setting out I am going to break the female squat record in my weight division in like 6 to 12 months. I've never really lifted heavy on squats. Like, I've just been an athlete my whole life, and I was in the Army, and so I have strong legs. But I do have knee issues. I have back issues. But you know what? I'm going to prove a point. There is no advantage that you can get rid of. Like, I already proved it once, but I didn't track it because, like, after a year on hormones, I started going to spin class, and my power numbers in spin class are within the 80th percentile among women. And it just doesn't make sense. Like, when I push over 800 watts and people are like, and the women in class who have been doing this their whole lives are like, I got 400. I'm like, I don't know what to say. No, and actually I've had people, when I start talking about this, like people at the gym, when I've mentioned it to them, they're like women, they're like, thank you for doing that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's not fair. But to your point, Riley Gaines said very similar to what you said. So she said,
we mentioned this issue being politicized. This is not politics for me. This is a real life issue. And I want to put it on record. I don't believe trans athletes should be banned from sports. That's the rhetoric that's being pushed from the opposition. Anti-trans bill bans trans athletes. Trans athletes should not be banned from playing sports. Of course not. I just want everyone to compete where it's fair and where it's safe. And I don't understand how that's overly controversial.
Yeah.
I mean, she nailed it.
Yeah,
I actually like Riley a lot.
She's been treated pretty nastily. I mean, you saw the videos of her being hounded and harassed, chased through a hallway at a college campus? Like, even it's not a good look when these right-wing or she's been working with right-wing groups. They say, like, this is an attack on women's rights. And then you respond by harassing and haranguing the women that speak out. Like, That's not a good look, and you're only further proving their point.
No, you're 100%. So yeah, there was that's what actually seeing her being attacked at San Francisco College, whatever that university was, that she like had to hide in a closet.
Yeah.
That was an issue, and she works with an organization called Icons. So that's like their biggest thing is women's sports, and I actually know both the founders of Icons as well. I've talked a lot with them, and we've coordinated. It's how I get some of the quotes for some of the articles I write based on these sports issues, because I know them. And so, but I wrote in that article because I realized, like, I'm like, these, like, if you look at the videos on that type of stuff, they're not trans people in those videos. They're just, as we call it, it's Trantifa. They're self-identifying into a category, or they're just speaking out as allies. And I'm like, what kind of allies are you if what you're doing is harming this community?
Need the ally. We need a complete and total shutdown on allies until we can figure out what the hell is going on, because these crazy people are doing way more damage than they are helping. Please stop helping. I'm talking to you, white liberal women who think they're LGBTQ allies and keep saying crazy shit. I'm talking to you.
Well, it's I always actually, it's what I always say is the white, was it the upper middle class white progressive woman is the one that thinks that she's the big ally. She's the one that's taking her kids to the drag show. She's the one, which I don't know why, again, like you were talking about drag shows earlier, I don't know why that you want your day out to be with your kids. You know, if that's going to be your fun time, why don't you just go with like your friends and have a good time? Why do you want to take your kids? But they think that they're being supportive of the community by bringing their kids now. But they're also the ones that are falling into this trans housing by proxy, to where they are transitioning their children so they're no longer considered oppressors, and they get these like woke points for being like transitioning their kids.
It's kind of like the non-binary thing, right? Where people are identifying as non-binary because it gives them woke victim points, or they get to be part of the acronym or whatever. But it's not actually, like Demi Lovato was non-binary and then just said, oh, I stopped that because it's too hard. And that's like obviously not, so it's not real then if you can just stop it, right? Because the whole thing about being gender dysphoric or being gay is you can't, like, if we could have just stopped it, we would have done so very early in life. It would have been much easier.
Yeah.
So something that
I don't think
like,
I would have transitioned if I could have just stopped it.
No, if I could have been heterosexual as a teenager, I would have loved to. Right? Gay people tried their whole life to not be, and then they're like, okay, this isn't going to change. And so if you can stop, if something can be turned on and off, it's like, I feel like it sometimes, actually, I'm going to put that away. It is not to be conflated with our inanimate characteristics. And I think that's what's very harmful about some of this stuff, is they're conflating things that actually are fads or choices with being gay or trans, which are not fads or choices. But for a long time, people thought or said they were. And now all of a sudden our allies are reinforcing that false idea. So please, I repeat, Karens, liberal white women, you need to stop helping. Yeah.
Now, I will say, I'll push back a little bit, just because you're right. Having gender dysphoria is not the choice. There is a choice to transition or not transition, which I know some people transition's not right for them, even though they have gender dysphoria. But to have gender dysphoria is not a choice.
That's what I mean. Nobody chooses to have gender dysphoria.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people that, a lot of detransitioners actually, that are like, I still have gender dysphoria, but it's not, it didn't help to transition. So what do I do now? And that's where they're stuck at.
My heart goes out to them. I can't.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, the detransitioners, I will probably dip my toe into that at some point, but I have yet to, partly because it's just so heartbreaking and sad.
Yeah. And obviously I've made friends with a lot of them in the space that I am in. And Chloe Cole is probably the biggest one. Me and her do a lot of events together, but I actually had somebody come up to me after an event, because there was just two people on the stage that it was just like, just always hearing their stories is always emotional. And they were like, they told me that they were watching me while they were telling their stories and that I'm a complete empath. And I've never been told that in my life. But I was like, but it's Chloe. And I know Chloe's story like the back of my hand. I could probably tell everybody Chloe's story because I've heard it so many times because we're so close and we've done so many events together. But there's so many of them that I actually, my heart goes out to especially like Tulip and Shapeshifter, who I had, who was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and we did a video and we hung out for a couple of days and really got to know each other. And it's like when you've actually gone through the bottom surgery and you regret it, that's a whole nother level. But then, I mean, but it's the same with the females when they have top surgery, and then it's like, what, you can't really replace that.
This is why I think you just have to be an adult to make those decisions. And I support,
Fully
at that
agree.
point, I totally support somebody's right to make those decisions. But you can't tell me a 12-year-old, not that they don't get top surgery usually, but like to go down the medicalization path at that young age, once you start going down, it very rarely do you ever turn back. You can't tell me that they can fully understand and comprehend the consequences of that at that young age. They simply cannot, especially because the medical transition can often cause lifelong infertility. That's not something a minor can really understand enough to say, yes, I'm okay with giving that up.
Yeah, no, it's really a rough situation. That's why I fight. I mean, that's why I have, I guess, now 2 bills that we've passed under my name. We're still working on getting we're expecting a veto in Louisiana, but we passed with a veto-proof majority. So we'll see about that. And so, yeah, it's like, that's why I push so hard. And actually libertarians come at me because I'm pushing stuff, against, transitioning of children. And I'm like, even in the most anarchist society, we would protect children. Like, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think it's hard because the case is parental rights to make their own kids' medical decisions. And that is compelling, but there does have to be a limit to that somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, we have limits on what parents can do to their children. Parents cannot, and this is graphic, and hopefully YouTube doesn't kill me, but parents can't pimp their kids out.
Right.
And so why is this shouldn't be very much seen much different than that. You can't abuse your children. And so this is kind of that same thing.
I will say I have sympathy for parents who their kid had gender dysphoria. They took them to a doctor and the doctor told them,
yes,
you need to transition your child or your child will unalive themselves. Sometimes on the right, I see people bullying the parents or attacking the parents. Yeah. And I think that's wrong because I think they were in an incredibly difficult position and they listened to the experts. Turns out the experts were probably wrong. And now, shocker. And now we're seeing a bunch of other countries totally change their standards on this. But I do have sympathy for the parents in these situations who simply listened to their kid's doctor and did what they were told by the medical professionals, by their psychiatrists. I don't blame the parents that much. I do have sympathy for them because they were in a rock and a hard place. Do I go along with this or do I risk they're telling me my child is going to unalive themselves? Like, I have sympathy for those parents. Do I think that they should be allowed to do that? No, but I do have sympathy for them.
Well, and that's I fully agree with that too, because there's more of an issue. Most of the issue that I take up with is with the medical industry as a whole. The medical industry is manipulating parents and they're manipulating patients. It's one of the reasons why I believe in informed consent for adults. But I sympathize very heavily with the detransitioners because when they transitioned, their doctors were telling them and they trusted their doctors, and the doctors, didn't tell them all the effects, to where I think that their lawsuits are going to, so the lawsuits are actually going to, affect, that's what's going to be the biggest thing. But I fully think that, like, if a doctor told you that this is going to be life-saving for you, or it's going to be, the best thing for you, and you went along with it, and it's not, then that's medical malpractice. And I think that they manipulate parents, and they manipulate the children, or the adults and children as well. And so I think that the biggest issue is with the medical industry. But I do want to jump onto, because this actually goes along with what you were saying about Riley Gaines earlier, and about how the left attacks her for speaking out. So Josh Hawley actually asked this question. I thought this was a brilliant answer.
Let me give you a chance to respond to something that Leah Thomas said recently, publicly. She said this publicly. They're using this quote now. They're using the guise of feminism, they meaning you, using the guise of feminism to sort of push transphobic beliefs, meaning you advocating for women's rights is actually just a cover for transphobia. Do you want to respond to that?
Feminism is not a fluid term. The original and the meaning of what it means to be a feminist is to uphold, respect, honor, embrace, and celebrate women on our own physical ceilings, our own uniqueness. That term has not changed. And what this really is a male mansplaining what it is to be a feminist, which I honestly think is pretty ironic, and it's something we've seen before.
Last question, and I'll ask this and then give you.
I mean,
kind of funny, yeah.
A male mansplaining, which is great. I know. So we're at the top of the hour, and we didn't get to talk about Robert Kennedy, but I just
RFK. That video I tweeted when that video went out, he skyrocketed in the polls with a certain subset of the gay community.
Yes, he did. Not just the gay community, the female community.
Maybe, but I just know there's a specific subset of gays that is here for a fit silver fox.
Absolutely. And there's so much we could talk about, but this was a great episode, Brad. Thanks for joining. And actually, this is kind of just a preview, right? Because we're going to get to kind of continue this conversation in like 20 days, maybe.
Yeah, Freedom Fest. Let's go.
Yeah, it's going to be me and Brad are on the stage together doing a fireside chat on LGBT issues on Saturday. So awesome. It'll be really good. If you guys are there, we'll be there. And but again, yeah. Is there anything you want to tell everybody where they can find you real quick?
Yeah, if you enjoyed this conversation, check out the Damage Control podcast with me, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube.
All right. And thank you. And as always, if you like this, click that like and subscribe button. Follow me across all social media platforms. And I will see you next time.